This video will be for the bound seam finish. So for this one, you're going to need 2 rectangles of the basic rectangle pattern that we've been using so far. And then you will also need a bias strip. So make sure that this bias strip, when you cut it out, that grain line is parallel to the selvage of your fabric. If this was the selvage, I would want that grain line to be parallel, meaning my pattern piece is going to be cut on the diagonal, rather than forcing your pattern piece to be parallel to the edge of your fabric. And that bias strip needs to get cut with fully or straight shears. I've got this in a different fabric to help you see what I'm doing a little bit better. But that'll be cut with the straight shears because we will end up sewing all edges of it. Okay, so this one is going to start with a plain 1/2 inch seam. Right sides together.
It was really good. I just remember it being really good.
At a 1/2 inch. Turn this off so you can see a little better.
I mean, you know, like,
Okay, now we're going to go over to our ironing board, bust this open, and then we're also going to prep our strip to go on. Okay, so bust that seam open to get that nice flat front on your seam line. Okay, and then we're going to set that aside for a second. For this particular sample, we're just going to finish one of our seam allowances. We'll use these same rectangles on the other side to do the Hong Kong seam, which will be another video. So for the bound, we have to prep our strip to go onto the fabric and pre-fold it. So I'm going to put it face down, so print side down onto the fabric, or onto the table. And then I'm going to fold it in half lengthwise. So as I'm folding this, I have to be very careful not to stretch out the strip. The bias of your fabric is where you have the most stretch, so it's very easy to pull on it or rub your iron down the length of your strip, stretch it out, and then you're going to shrink the width, and you won't have enough fabric to sew onto your sample. So make sure as you're ironing that you're picking up your iron and scooting it over rather than rubbing it down the length of your bias strip. And same thing when you're folding it with your fingers, try not to rub and pull down the length. Okay, once you've got that center crease, I'm going to unfold it. And now I'm going to fold those 2 raw edges in towards that center crease right there. So both sides, I'll do one at a time, but both sides will end up meeting right at that center crease. So I'm doing little hops with my iron, kind of just barely picking it up, scooting it over, and putting it back down. That way I can kind of keep the fabric in place without rubbing my iron across it. I want to get a really good crease on that because if my strip tries to open up or pop open on me as I'm sewing, it's going to make it a lot harder to get on evenly to your fabric. Okay, now turn it around, do the same thing to the other side. So fold that raw edge into the center. Okay, once I have that done, I'm going to fold right where those two meet. So you should already have a crease there. This is the center where we folded a minute ago. But fold those two so that you now have a 1/4 inch wide strip with an opening on one side. Make sure that both sides of that strip are exactly the same width, a 1/4 inch. If they are not the same width, then it'll make the next step much harder. We're going to be stitching through multiple layers at a time, trying to catch the top and the bottom of this. And if they're uneven widths, you may not catch the shorter one. Again, get a really good crease in there so that it doesn't pop open on you as you're trying to stitch. You want it to lay nice and flat. Once you've got that pressed and both sides are even, we're going to be ready to put it onto our sample. So grab that sample, single out one of the seam allowances so the other 3 layers are out of the way. And on the raw edge, I'm going to slip this on like a cap for the end. So right in that opening of my bias strip, I'm going to put my seam allowance in there, get it all the way back to the crease of the bias strip, and then I can begin pinning it on. So get it fully inserted. And now I'm going to start pinning it. It's still best to pin it horizontally so that you can get those pins out easily and sew as close to your pin as possible before having to take it out. So it'll take a little bit of practice, but within that 1/4 inch strip, you want to go in and out once. I'm going to do that all the way down the strip. Again, making sure that my seam allowance is as far into that crease of the strip as possible. I don't want the strip to start coming off. Okay, now I'm going to take that over to my machine and edge stitch on the inside. Okay, now that we've got that on, I'll be ready to do my edge stitch on this inside folded edge of my strip. And I should be able to catch the top and the bottom of the strip at the same time, since we folded those to the exact same width. So I'm going to put that on the inside edge of my toe. Right now, it's touching the inside edge of my left toe, since that's where the fold is closest to. And then I'll be able to do my back stitch and run down the length of the strip. Just make sure as you go that the strip doesn't try to start slipping off the edge of your seam allowance. Okay, once you're done, double check that it caught the front and the back fully. If it did not, you will need to take it off and redo it. So that's from the front, and that is from the back. And then you can see I just have a tiny little bit of extra at the end. So that shows you how much my strip stretched as I was going. So that's a very small amount. That's a good amount of control on your stretch. So I can just snip that off at the end. If you have more than a 1/4 inch hanging off, you would need to recut your strip and redo it. So you can tell that usually when you're pinning before you actually get to the sewing part. But if it's stretched out too much, I would cut a new one and redo it. But if you just have a 1/4 inch or less hanging off, you can just go ahead and cut it.